"Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding," she said shakily, her earlier confidence slipping away. Officer Rodriguez glanced between Beverly and me, his expression tightening as if he'd just realized something was off. "I'll need to see more documentation regarding this supposed sale," he said firmly. Beverly scrambled with her phone, likely trying to reach whoever had helped her forge those papers, but something else caught my attention. She knew far too much about my car. Not just surface details, but specifics no casual observer could guess. She rattled off the 428 Cobra jet engine, the exact gear ratio, even the custom exhaust I'd installed just weeks ago. Either she'd studied the car obsessively for months, or someone had been feeding her insider knowledge. Rodriguez closed his notepad, giving Beverly the kind of look reserved for messy domestic disputes. "You'll need to come to the station and clear up the details of this alleged transaction. Mr. Miller, we may request further proof, but as it stands, this appears to be your vehicle." Beverly's cheeks flushed crimson as she realized her plan had collapsed. Still, she tried one last bluff. "Fine. But I'm calling my lawyer, and Harold Green. Let's see how confident Mr. Miller feels when he's up against people who know how this really works." The officers left, promising to sort out the paperwork mess. I stayed in my driveway long after the patrol cars disappeared, my eyes fixed on the drone still hovering overhead. None of this felt random. Beverly had clearly expected this confrontation, though her reaction showed she hadn't been fully prepared. Which meant she had help, and not very competent help at that. If Beverly Lang thought she could scare me into surrendering my father's car, she was about to learn the Miller family didn't back down, especially when the odds were on our side. The next morning, I called my sister Emily before my coffee even finished brewing. She was the practical one, law school instead of grease-stained knuckles like me. At 28, she was wrapping up her clerkship at Patterson and Associates. Emily had always rolled her eyes at my expensive hobby, but yesterday's madness had changed her tune. "Ethan, what Beverly did was completely insane," she said immediately when she picked up. "Normal people don't call the cops with forged documents unless they're either delusional or part of something much bigger." That's when I made a move most people would think backwards. Instead of keeping the Shelby in my garage where Beverly could continue her games, I let it be temporarily impounded at the city's secured vehicle facility. Emily thought I'd lost it, until I explained. "Look, Em. If she wants to play with fake paperwork and mysterious calls to this Harold guy, I'll let her think she's winning. Meanwhile, I'll figure out what's really happening." What I didn't mention to the police was that Dad had hidden a backup GPS in the Shelby back in his racing days, tucked deep in the engine bay, invisible to a casual inspection. Before the tow truck came, I slipped an extra tracker under the rear bumper too, disguised as part of the original hardware. With the car safe behind official security, I shifted into engineer mode, gather data first. Beverly's social media was a treasure trove, lavish handbags, pricey restaurants, and photos from luxury car auctions across 3 states. Not exactly what you'd expect from a suburban HOA president's salary. Emily helped me dig deeper through public records. Beverly had once worked for Green & Associates Real Estate, owned by none other than Harold Green. "Ethan, check this out," Emily said, sliding county property records across her laptop. "Harold Green isn't just some business contact. He's chairman of the city council. And these records show he's been behind some major real estate deals over the past 5 years. More suspicious. Beverly's exit from his firm hadn't been on good terms, right around the time she wormed her way into the HOA presidency. That evening, I investigated the gadget I'd seen Beverly fiddling with yesterday. It wasn't a drone. Hidden in my bushes was a small listening device, cheap, but effective. Positioned perfectly to capture conversations in my driveway and garage. That explained how she knew so much about the Shelby. She'd been eavesdropping on my calls with part suppliers, chats with fellow gearheads, and even my conversations with Emily. The next morning brought another twist. Beverly had listed a 1968 Shelby GT500 for sale on multiple auction sites, complete with professional photos, taken in my garage. The asking price, $85,000. Nearly double the actual value. The description claimed it was a fully restored, numbers-matching Eleanor tribute. Bolder still, she was advertising with photos of my car, apparently certain no one could connect it to her. Emily's continued digging turned up even worse news. Beverly was drowning in nearly $200,000 of debt, including a hefty balance owed to International Auto Ventures, a company dealing in overseas car sales. Her desperation explained her recklessness. But it also meant one car, even a valuable one, wouldn't be enough to dig her out. Months of relentless HOA violations from Beverly suddenly made sense. The timing, the coordination, all too precise to be coincidence. That evening, Jake Thompson, our neighborhood electrician, knocked on my door, looking uneasy. "Ethan, I've been thinking about what you told me yesterday," he began, shifting nervously. "Something weird happened last month. Beverly asked me to install security upgrades around the neighborhood common areas. But the equipment she wanted me to use, it wasn't standard. It was professional-grade surveillance gear." Jake had turned the job down, but he'd saved the specifications. When Emily reviewed them, her face tightened. The devices weren't cameras at all. They were advanced monitoring systems capable of tracking vehicles and recording conversations from impressive distances. That afternoon, Mrs. Patterson, the 85-year-old widow down the street, called me with another piece of the puzzle. She'd been at war with the HOA for months over her late husband's vintage piano, which she kept in her sunroom. "But here's the strange part, dear," she said, her voice trembling. "Harold Green stopped by 3 times last month asking detailed questions about that piano. He knew it was a 1924 Steinway Model M. He knew about the custom work my husband did. He even asked if I still had the original purchase papers. How could he possibly know all that unless he'd been digging?" The pattern snapped into focus. Harold researched valuable possessions. Beverly applied HOA pressure. Then Harold's companies swooped in with solutions. Emily's legal digging uncovered the most damning detail yet. Beverly's debts weren't simple credit card bills. They were tangled through a network of loans and partnerships, all leading back to Harold Green's businesses. "She's not just working for him," Emily explained, sliding corporate filings across the table. "She's a minority partner in 3 of his companies. That makes her financially tied to him. She can't stop even if she wanted to." Bank records confirmed it. Beverly had been making regular payments to a company called International Auto Ventures for a year and a half. That night, the GPS tracker on my Shelby pinged again, this time moving toward the shipping district near the port. Emily and I followed at a safe distance. From the shadows of the lot, we watched Beverly oversee the loading of what looked like my car onto a truck bound for the shipping terminal. "We need to call Agent Rebecca Taylor at Customs Enforcement," Emily said quickly, already dialing. "If they're exporting stolen cars, that's federal. We can stop this before your Shelby disappears overseas." As the truck pulled away, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered. The voice was calm, deliberate, terrifyingly self-assured. "Hello, Ethan. This is Harold Green. I think it's time we had a conversation about your father and some unfinished business from a long time ago." The line went dead. The message couldn't have been clearer. This wasn't just about my car. This had been set in motion decades ago. Harold's call rattled me more than I wanted to admit. But it also confirmed what I'd started to fear after finding that old company photo. This wasn't simply theft. This was personal. And it had been festering for 30 years. I stayed up combing through Dad's files until my eyes burned, searching for any reference to Harold Green. Buried in a manila envelope labeled Insurance Claims 1995, I found them. Safety reports Dad had filed about defective aircraft components. Each flagged for review. Each signed off by Harold Green. By dawn, Emily was back at my kitchen table, this time with Agent Rebecca Taylor, a sharp-eyed customs officer who looked like she'd rather be chasing cartel smugglers than unraveling HOA fraud. "Mr. Miller," she said crisply, laying out photos and files, "your sister briefed me. What you're describing matches a pattern we've been tracking for 6 months." The evidence was chilling. Photos of shipping containers, warehouse manifests, documents, all echoing Beverly's operation. At least 3 other states. Always the same formula. Always involving local officials. Always feeding valuable property into an overseas pipeline. You don't understand what he's capable of. It was the first time I'd seen genuine fear in Beverly's eyes. And despite everything she'd put me through, I almost felt a pang of sympathy for her. Inside the shipping container, the operation's full scale became undeniable. Stacked neatly among crates were not only stolen vehicles but an entire system of meticulously catalogued items. Mrs. Patterson's 1924 Steinway piano sat wrapped in protective padding, labeled for shipment to a collector in Germany. Marcus vintage Harley-Davidson was prepped and crated for Japan. Jake Thompson's father's rare pocket watch collection was lined up and documented like museum pieces. "This isn't simple theft," Agent Taylor said, snapping photos. "This is cultural heritage trafficking. They've been systematically stripping American communities of priceless historical artifacts." Beverly's confession, recorded on the dock with federal agents watching, revealed Harold Green as the mastermind behind a scheme that had run for at least 5 years. "He researches families in affluent neighborhoods," she explained, voice cracking between sobs, "targeting elderly residents or financially vulnerable homeowners with valuable antiques or classic cars. Then he uses his city council position to access property records, tax info, insurance claims. Once he identifies targets, I'd create HOA violations or other municipal pressure, making their lives miserable until they were desperate enough to sell." The calculated cruelty of the scheme was staggering. Harold's network stretched well beyond our neighborhood. Beverly disclosed similar operations in 15 other communities, each managed by an HOA president or local official, coerced either by blackmail or financial dependence. "He keeps files on everyone," Beverly said, her eyes red and swollen, locking on me. "Financial issues, family secrets, anything he can use as leverage. That's how he controlled me, and the others." Agent Taylor immediately radioed for coordinated raids across all 15 locations. I could see in her face, though, that this was going to be far bigger than anyone expected. Finding my Shelby was both triumphant and heartbreaking. 2 years of careful restoration had been preserved meticulously. Harold's people had handled it with professional care. But seeing it crated like mere merchandise made me understand Mrs. Patterson's anguish over her husband's piano. These weren't just objects, they were irreplaceable fragments of personal history, memories entwined with loved ones. Meanwhile, Beverly's live stream from the container went viral. Broadcast to her 847 Facebook followers, it captured her breakdown in real time, including her admission to federal agents of helping Harold Green steal from neighbors for 3 years. Comments flooded in. "This happened to my grandmother in Phoenix. She lost her husband's vintage guitar collection to someone like this." Within 6 hours, the video was shared over 50,000 times, turning Beverly into an unwilling symbol of suburban crime exploitation. Harold Green arrived at the port just as Beverly was loaded into a federal transport vehicle. Unlike Beverly's collapse, he remained composed, stepping from a black sedan with the assurance of a man who believed political power shielded him from consequences. Agent Taylor met him halfway across the lot. I couldn't hear their conversation, but his posture shifted, shoulders sagged as she showed him photographs from inside the container. His lawyer's confident expression vanished when she handed him a federal arrest warrant. "Mr. Miller," Agent Taylor called me over. "Mr. Green requested to speak with you privately before transport. You're under no obligation, but he claims he has information about your father that you'll want to hear." Standing face to face with Harold for the first time, I was struck by how ordinary he looked, a typical businessman in an expensive suit. But when he met my gaze, a chill ran down my spine. "Your father discovered something about me 30 years ago that could have ruined my career," Harold said, voice calm despite the handcuffs. "Before he could expose me, he died in that convenient racing accident. And do you know what I found in his belongings afterward? Evidence he wasn't trying to be a hero. He was planning to blackmail me, just like I've been blackmailing others all these years." Harold's smile was the coldest I'd ever seen. "The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Ethan, your father was just like me. Only he got caught before he could profit." The words hit me like a punch to the chest. Before I could respond, Agent Taylor stepped between us. "Mr. Green, you have the right to remain silent. I strongly suggest you exercise it. Anything you say here can and will be used in federal court." But Harold wasn't finished. As agents began leading him to the transport vehicle, he turned back to me, that same icy smile lingering. "Ask your sister about the safety deposit box, Ethan." "Exactly what kind of person you were," Harold said, and he made sure the truth would eventually come out. For the first time, Harold Green's composure broke entirely. The man who had terrorized 15 neighborhoods, stolen millions in personal property, and destroyed countless families' treasured memories collapsed in tears in a federal interrogation room. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt," he sobbed, the first honest words he'd spoken in decades. "It started small. Just a few items here and there, from people who wouldn't miss them. But then it became easier, and more profitable, and I couldn't stop." Beverly's livestream reached peak unintended comedy when she attempted to end it but accidentally started a new broadcast. This time, she was somewhere else, probably a holding cell, and talking to someone off camera, clearly a federal agent. "What do you mean I can't get bail?" she exclaimed, oblivious to hundreds of viewers. "I cooperated. I told you everything about Harold. I even gave you the spreadsheets." The agent's calm voice explained that interstate trafficking charges typically didn't allow bail. Beverly interrupted repeatedly, desperate. "But I have a dentist appointment Thursday. And my book club meets Friday. You can't just keep me here indefinitely." The comment section exploded. "Karen wants to speak to the federal manager," read one particularly popular post. That evening, as we left the federal building, I felt something I hadn't since this nightmare began: genuine peace. Harold Green was facing federal charges that could easily result in a life sentence. Beverly would serve significant time, though her cooperation spared her the harshest penalties. Most importantly, Dad's reputation was intact, if anything, enhanced. He had died trying to stop the very crimes exposed decades later. The Shelby was legally and morally mine again, and Harold's corrupt network had been dismantled across 3 states. The real victory, though, was simpler. Truth had finally triumphed over lies, and justice had arrived, no matter how long it took. A year later, I stood in my garage on a crisp Saturday morning, sunlight streaming through the open door, reflecting off Eleanor's pristine chrome. 12 months had brought changes I could never have imagined. When Beverly first called the police on me for stealing my car, the federal case had concluded. Harold Green received a life sentence without parole, one of the oldest defendants ever convicted under federal racketeering laws. Beverly got 7 years but could serve less with good behavior and continued cooperation. Victims recovered over $47 million in property, and 15 communities replaced corrupt HOAs with transparent, democratically elected councils. Emily had passed the bar and launched her own practice, specializing in property rights and elder abuse. Her first major client, Mrs. Patterson, who successfully sued Harold's estate for emotional distress, using the settlement to establish a foundation supporting elderly fraud victims. "I never thought I'd say this," Emily told me one morning at the kitchen table, reviewing case files, "but watching you fight for that car taught me what really matters. It's not about the money or the objects. It's about standing up to people who think they can take whatever they want just because they have power." Her practice flourished, largely from referrals from victims of similar schemes exposed after Harold's arrest. Marcus Rodriguez was elected the first president of our new neighborhood council. His first action, a property protection protocol requiring any complaints about residents' belongings to pass through a 3-person committee, with a mandatory cooling-off period. "This ensures nobody can use bureaucratic pressure to target neighbors," he explained at a meeting attended by over 200 residents. Marcus also launched a consulting business helping other communities reform HOA systems. Jake Thompson used restitution funds from Harold's case to start Thompson Security Solutions, specializing in protecting valuable personal property. His first major client, a vintage car club that had been targeted by copycat criminals inspired by news of Harold's operation. "The best part," he told me while installing a state-of-the-art security system in my garage, "is helping people protect what they love instead of worrying who might try to steal it." His company grew to 4 full-time employees, with plans for a second location. Mrs. Patterson became a celebrity advocate for victims' rights, speaking across 3 states and testifying before legislative committees on protections against organized property theft. Her 1924 Steinway piano, fully restored at Harold's expense, now anchored a music therapy program she established at the local senior center. "Harold thought he could steal my memories along with my husband's piano," she said in a televised interview on the arrest's anniversary. "But memories can't be shipped overseas. They live here," she added, tapping her chest. Agent Rebecca Taylor had been promoted to head the newly formed Federal Property Crimes Task Force, a specialized unit designed specifically to combat organized theft rings like Harold's operation. In its first year, the task force had already disrupted 12 similar schemes across 8 states, recovering over $200 million in stolen property and arresting 47 suspects. The Harold Green case taught us that property crime isn't just about individual thieves, she explained at a press conference announcing the task force's first-year results. It's about organized criminal enterprises using legitimate institutions, government offices, homeowner associations, as cover for systematic theft. The task force's success had prompted congressional hearings on federal oversight of local housing authorities. Meanwhile, Eleanor herself had become a local landmark, featured in car shows and community events as a symbol of perseverance and justice. I had completed Dad's restoration exactly as he had planned, using his detailed notes and sketches to guide every decision. A small brass plaque on the dashboard now read, "In memory of David Miller, a man who chose truth over safety." More importantly, the Shelby inspired me to fulfill another of Dad's dreams. Using funds from the Federal Restitution Fund and community donations, I opened the David Miller Technical Training Center, a non-profit teaching automotive and aerospace skills to young people from low-income families. The center operated out of a city-donated warehouse, featuring 4 working bays, a full machine shop, and classroom space for 30 students. Our first graduating class of 12 students all found employment with local automotive and aerospace companies, earning starting salaries averaging $18 per hour. "Your father would be incredibly proud," Emily said as we watched our second class dismantle and rebuild their first engines. "He always believed that skills and integrity were the most valuable things we could give young people." The program already had a waiting list of over 100 applicants and had attracted inquiries from other communities wanting to replicate our model. Harold's last attempt at manipulation had spectacularly backfired. The USB drive he kept as insurance didn't just contain evidence of his crimes, it also implicated 6 other local officials in corruption schemes. The district attorney's office used Harold's blackmail files to build cases against a county commissioner, 2 city planning officials, and 3 HOA board members who had been part of his network. "Criminals always make the same mistake," Agent Taylor had told me during the final case debriefing. "They assume everyone else is as corrupt as they are. They don't realize honest people will eventually use their evidence against them." Our neighborhood, once nearly destroyed by Harold's schemes, was now stronger and more united than ever. Property values rose after publicity highlighted reformed governance and community oversight. The annual Harold Green Memorial Car Show, organized each summer, became a regional attraction, drawing vintage car enthusiasts from across the state and raising funds for victim assistance programs. Memorial might be an ironic term. Harold was still alive in federal prison, but nobody cared. The event brought positive attention and unity to the community. That morning, as I closed the garage door and prepared to drive Eleanor to our monthly cars and coffee gathering, I reflected on how far we had come. Harold had tried to destroy our community and steal our most treasured possessions. Instead, his crimes had brought us together in ways simple neighborly cooperation never could. The Shelby's engine purred perfectly, just as Dad had intended. But now it carried the voices of an entire community that had learned to stand up for itself. Sometimes justice comes quickly, sometimes it takes 30 years. But the most important lesson I learned, it always arrives, especially when good people refuse to give up the fight. What would you have done if your neighbor called 911, claiming you stole your own car? Would you have fought back like me, or given in to the pressure? This story proves that justice isn't always immediate, but it's always worth the fight. If this tale of suburban corruption and family legacy kept you hooked, hit that subscribe button for more blockbuster stories, where truth triumphs over lies.